Hello, dear Republica. Veterans. It's a great honor for us. We'll introduce ourselves. If you haven't heard of us, maybe you want to try. Hello, I'm Ahmad Katlesh. I'm from Syria, and I'm author, podcaster. I've written multiple books on Arabic, short stories and stories, and this is my second book with Vanessa on German. And I'm Vanessa Vu. I'm a journalist at Zeit Online. I moderate Klassenzimmer at Schaubühne. I've got a podcast that's called Rise and Shine. And we met about 3 years ago and started to get into an intensive exchange with each other. Wrote emails to each other, and from that emerged a book. And we only wanted to get to know each other, and noticed that there would be an intensive reflection of our migration biographies. For him, it's a migration of flight, and I haven't never. And for me, I haven't experienced this, but in my parents' generation. But there were similar questions, and the common challenge to deal with these topics through different language barriers. Ahmad wrote in Arabic, I wrote in German, and we want to talk about how to talk about these things through all these barriers of understandings, be it language, be it trauma. How can you find to each other through all these barriers? Our gem was ChatGPT, Google Translate, etc., and that's what it's about today. So yeah, I wrote Vanessa and wanted to write in Arabic because I thought I would like to write in my language because that's my strength, and I didn't want to speak in English or want to talk to her in English, and I didn't want to talk in German because I don't speak German very well, or didn't speak German very well. Now it's better. I always wanted to use my own language because it's my identity, and here we started to write and get to know each other. And for me, it was this story with being a migrant. When they have a partner to learn the language, there was a red line. For me, I wanted the deep exchange. So everyday language, we use English as a tool, but when the book. When the book would come, I knew I could reflect my identity in my language. We decided against choosing one language because some have heard of love languages. We wanted to communicate in different languages, the community, words, gestures, and sometimes it's like. Sometimes the strongest language can be to give your language a meaning. My mother tongue is Vietnamese, but in this case it's Arabic and mine is German, and I can't really express myself in Vietnamese. One of the theses of our collaboration was that it's sometimes better to remain in your language, and sometimes it's better to. Remain that language. So I learned a little Arabic to speak to understand those letters, but I work with words as a podcaster and journalist, but it's always possible to translate, but with my mother tongue, using my mother tongue means that to reflect on your language. In this book, I wanted to reflect on myself with a different language. That's why we used our mother tongues. And next to verbal languages, we also have bodily languages. We dance a lot, but so this book, we consist of different languages, and these languages find their barriers. And there's the question where it's about war and anger and structural violence. On this photo, these are my books from Damascus. My brother sent me this picture 4 years ago when my family visited their apartment after 7 years of war, and I saw this picture of my books and everything. I couldn't speak for many days. I lost my language, and even in Arabic. Our apartment was a war zone between IS, Free Army, Assad regime. Everybody went into the houses to ransack them, but they left the books like this. The house was completely empty. Even the doors have been left, but the books were left. They probably weren't worth enough, so they weren't plundered. And that's one part that takes away our language. And the other part is if it's our own language. So anger and rage manifest as a feeling, is like either screaming or speechlessness. And sometimes I need the paper because of my language, my German. My first poem that I wrote in Germany 6 or 7 years ago starts with
يقتل الآخر بكلمة. Missa werden Aussprache.
That was too fast to translate, I'm sorry. This was the foreword of my first poem that I wrote 6 or 7 years ago. There was the language was the strongest motive. I had the feeling that I lost my power here, to debate things and tell my stories, and or even order a cup of coffee. It's not only the language; it also has to do with what is happening here. Not only because of the language, but also because the political situation and the situation in the media. There was an interesting talk before here talking about Middle East. It's often that suffering and violence can't be put into language, and it needs decades and generations to find words. And we're watching this one war in the Middle East. There's a lot of suffering that can't find a word, and there's a huge fight about the right words. And we fought this fight in the small, and the anger and the violence that was still in my parents' generation, that is just coming out of my parents decades later, and finding a way now. And I was impatient finding his story of fleeing, and you first fled to Jordan and then here. And I know that war and violence can't find a language, and I accepted this this for my parents, but it was really hard for me to accept this from my partner. And this is why I could write this book with Vanessa. I couldn't tell my story or Arabs have the same mother tongue, but the question is always, where are you politically? Where are you positioned? And I couldn't do this in German because there's always this victim role that that people impose on me, and people expect something or ask me about integration or sacrifice. I want to speak eye to eye to people and debate with people. And I understood that I could talk to Vanessa, and she has this other background, but I also wanted to give you this quote by Alfred Döblin. I found this book before I went to Germany, and that this has so much to do with me and language and things, and I'll read it. Okay. Moving from one country to another, losing everything that you know and that nourished you, and living for years as a beggar, living in an exile. That's my sofa, my chair that sits in exile. So people sent Döblin these letters. While you live in the U.S., you're not in the war. But Döblin answered this. Okay, we moved around this, and it was a really stressful process. And I wrote something in German, he wrote in Arab. What do we do? And we ourselves used translation programs. For the Arabic, there wasn't mainly Google Translate in the beginning. Nowadays, there's also DeepL for Arabic. ChatGPT works also extremely well. And what we did is to puzzle things together. And just before publication, we talked with a human translator, worked together with a human translator. The differences were astonishing because you want to expect that if you talk to a human translator, that the human translator gives you the best version for you to understand the other person, but there's also a lot of boundaries. For me, there's a lot. Translation is always description, and especially in literature and in poetry, to understand and what. So translation means that you basically try and understand and reformulate what someone is trying to say. So in literature, if you tell Vanessa that the face looks like the moon, it's in German it's an insult. In Arabic, it's the most beautiful thing that you can say to someone, and that has to do with not only language. It also has to do with the landscape, with the society. It comes from Saudi Arabia, and where you can't see anything at night, but only the moon, and that what shines, and therefore it's the most beautiful thing in the sky. In Germany, you say moon face, but that's not a compliment at all, you know.
And that also has a lot to do with so many different words. Like when I say that I want to translate my poetry, for example, a part was a person is drowning in love, and in German it's not particularly pretty, But in Arabic, that is something quite meaningful, and you get new life from this. Also, the word house in Arabic means home, and home as a metaphor more than the physical building, and more than what you maybe say with Wohnung, apartment in German. So, and the conclusion we came to is that we value human translation, also the art of paraphrasing and transforming to different languages, including a cultural background. But we still preferred working with translation software rather than humans, because humans read a text and translate it the way they read it, to the best of their knowledge and ability. But translators are also artists, and they have a certain style that they put onto the text. And the risk here is that you accept that as the one translation, the one thing that others receive and read. But and ignoring the option that there are many other possible translations. And that doesn't really happen with automated translations, especially not with Google. Google just gives you something, sometimes not even proper like grammar. DeepL is much better. GPT-4 is the best, at least as far as I can judge that for Arabic. But the power therein is not that it's the most literal or the most correct translation, but that it gives us an erroneous and broken translation, so that we have to go into a kind of translation process ourselves and have to expend effort to understand. Which means I get some words from Ahmed, I don't understand them, I copy them in to Google, translate them maybe to English or German, and I know that neither of them come close to the original, but it's kind of somewhere in the general vicinity. So for me, that means I maybe think 3 times as long. Maybe I ask clarifying questions, and I really go into this intense process, this intense thought process that I think I've never applied in the context of a person that just tells me something in German and is trying to explain themselves. So that creates a context where we engage with language in a way that doesn't normally exist, and we break out of specific choreographies of language. For example, when you talk about your own biography, there's some questions that as an immigrant you always get, like, where were you born, where did you come from, what did you experience in the war, have you been persecuted, is there any proof for that, how did you flee? And you get used to this kind of speaking and explaining yourself. But when you speak your own language and put it into a translation software, and that spits out something that creates something different, and that became a very strong force for us that we kept pursuing, and that maybe led to a more honest conversation, a more honest exchange for us. Yeah, and for me it's also a little bit different. Like when I get the text from Vanessa in German, I could understand the way she uses language. She uses longer sentences, shorter sentences. The translation was a little bit better for me as well, even though it lost the meaning sometimes a little bit, but I can see how you think, how it goes with the language that you use. But for example, the ChatGPT, it kind of does what human translators also do. It paraphrases, and sometimes it creates a new text almost. And despite all of our attempts to wrap violent experiences into words, we realize that in the end it is the human themselves that comes next to us and whose voices affect us the most. So we brought you a book that we read in our own voices And we brought you a video including subtitles in German and Arabic. So we're just going to play that for you. Maybe you can understand better the result of this translation process. Dear Ahmad, I'm writing to you from my former childhood home. Time has stood still here for over 10 years. Every time I visited, I wanted to clean up. Throw away useless stuff, get rid of embarrassing relics of my former self, reenact just a few memories. But somehow, I was always too lazy, and today, I'm amazed at the life I've left behind. Dear Vanessa, I was asking myself if I was jealous that you were with your family during the holidays, and that I was alone here. But to be honest, I feel pity for you, and I'm happy with my loneliness. I know that gathering the family at the Christmas Eve table is an intimate matter, but I think that the holidays are also an annual opportunity for families everywhere. All parts of the world open up their problems, and the home becomes a space to release the psychological complexes of all family members. I miss you. Even though we've only spent a few days together, there is something unnatural and cold about being so far away from you. My parents turned up all the heaters in the house, probably their way of hugging us grown children. Normally, we spend most of our time sitting next to each other in the living room, a few centimeters apart, each at their own screen, each with a cup of cough or chamomile tea. This year, my mother served chrysanthemum tea, and with it a new topic of conversation. But now everyone has retreated to their rooms, and the general loneliness has been joined by an emptiness that even a glowing heater cannot change. You wanted to know how it felt for me to see your old room. It was a strange experience. What connects me to you is that we both have a past full of fractures. I found myself in a museum of memory, spending hours looking at details, dust on pictures, CDs and souvenirs thrown on shelves. I was undecided whether it was better to keep these memories or leave them behind. The feeling of strangeness that accompanied me stemmed from my inability to understand my feelings about the possibility of almost anyone to come back in memory in a tangible way, see and touch the details. There is no place to go back to see my memory. The many homes that were left were temporary homes, in which I tried not to leave a memory. The houses in Syria that were lost had some of that memory buried under them, and I carried some details of my family's bags. They were displaced to a safer area at the time after ISIS stormed the area, and then turned it into a hotbed of war between all parties to the conflict: ISIS, other Islamic groups, the opposition's Free Army, and the Assad regime's army. Dear Vanessa, 9 years ago, on the same time in the year as now, I crossed the border into Jordan. Rain was pouring, it was storming and snowing. A week before, we tried to cut down trees to make more firewood because there was no electricity and we could only keep warm with fire. I had seen people die under bombs before, but that week was the first time I had seen a baby freeze to death. That alone was enough to make me hate the outdoors, the rain and the smell of wet earth, and I carried that hate with me for years. You write about smells and scents and I shudder. For example, when I think of smells from my childhood, I think of the frying oil my parents brought home from work that stuck to their hair and clothes even when they washed it off. Of our musty, too big clothes that others no longer wanted to wear. Of urine and smoke, streaks of which papered the walls of our asylum seekers' home. Of my mother's heavy perfume that she wore in every car ride on special occasions, and that always made me sick. But her pride outweighed my request to smell, like she always did, which for her meant like a waitress or a factory worker or cleaning lady. I think of freshly fertilized fields, the smell of which bit our noses faster than we could roll up our car windows. I'm thinking about beer. Everyone here has something to drown. boredom, loneliness, lack of prospects, meaninglessness. People swell with it, exude the hops from all their pores, washing away the already thin walls of decency, and then homophobic and racist insults bubble out of their mouths. One drunk shouted in my parents' diner, "I'm going to burn down your house." Just like that, so random and so pointless, and his friends laughed. Fun, just joking. And then he walked away with his beer bottles and beer friends. But in Germany, with non-stop rain, this trauma began to heal. Or at least it doesn't come so strongly with light rain. In the attachment you will find a picture of my tent, what it looked like after it was flooded with water the day after I arrived at Zaatari camp. Now I like the photo, but not the smell. Yesterday afternoon I went for a walk and I passed by what was then our asylum seekers' home. High, wiry construction fences were erected around it. The banner referred to a demolition company. Without thinking much, I ran to a small space in the fence and slipped through. My eyes fell on a two-story house. It belonged to the same building complex, but was rented privately. We lived there after our time in the home. The front door was already missing, there was darkness inside, and a terrible smell. Maybe it was the peeling wallpaper, the moldy plaster, the old pipes. What do rusted cables, torn carpets, exposed walls smell like? Like this, always? Or was this a unique smell that only houses full of fear and nightmares can produce? I hesitated at first, then held my breath, went in, and remembered nothing. No past image obscured the present stench. All of the interior walls were also missing. I couldn't have said what rooms there were in this house, how we filled them, whether we filled them at all, or whether we just lived in them like unwanted ghosts. So this is where I come from, or rather, this is where I got out without leaving anything behind. The mosque with its thick walls and high roof was as cold as a mortuary. We were exhausted but refused death. Morning light brightened the room slightly. I felt like I was in a grave. I was familiar with pain and strain of all kinds, but here the cold ate me with my eyes open. My only luck was that mosques are not equipped with benches like churches, but with thick carpets instead. I lifted one of them and lay under it, as if wrapped in a shroud, waiting for sleep.
A sheikh once told me that when I was a child, that death is like sleep. Even in sleep, the soul escapes to heaven, and either it comes back or you wake up or God keeps it with you, then you're dead. I think it was so cold that in that mosque, and the carpet was so thick that my soul only reached the ceiling and then returned to me. And so I woke up again. Okay, that was a little view into our work that we went through memories, through war and violence experience. And if you can take anything from something, if you are in a relationship with someone not speaking the same language, then I can just draw this conclusion from our 3 years work. Every language that comes out is okay. It doesn't necessarily need human translators. The power is often in the translation programs. And the question is often, how do we understand each other in our own languages if we're not listening? And can digital tools just not help us? Yeah. And the last thing is, it's worth it to unravel those work, and it was a lot of work to find the language. If you want, we're outside. That was our half an hour, and we're at the book stand. We're celebrating our premiere in Schaubühne on Friday or on June the 8th in Zeitkreis Zentrum in Berlin-Wedding. Thank you very much.